Welcome to Safe Passages, everyone. I'm your host, Tara Jabari, and today we have Jo Scott. She's a nomad along with her husband and dog, who runs her own business as an artist, and her Substack is called The Traveling Artist. She offers interviews with other creatives and travelers. She gives tips on how to run your own creative business and much more. So thank you, Jo, for joining me.
Pleasure. Very, very pleased to be here. Thank you.
So you've been on Substack for a lot longer than I have. I think a little over a year now.
Yes. A good 18 months now. Yes. Sorry, I had to think about that. But yes. Yeah.
You also, one of my favorite things is you have in your homepage of your Substack, you have that pinned, if you're not sure, start here. And you kind of explain that in 2020, early 2020, you were like, if not now, when? To actually decide to become a nomad, really to travel around. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So I don't know, like a lot of people, this was before the pandemic. I'd got into, I don't know if everyone has their little favorite sort of comfort YouTube channels that they go and watch and a bit of escapism. And mine was van life videos. And there was a particular one, Wild We Roam, a young couple traveling Europe in a beat up van. They'd done it up and they were just really in their 20s and really living it. And I just thought, I caught myself in this thought of, oh my goodness, I wish I'd done that at their age. And I stopped short and went, oh, no, hang on a minute. I'm not a pensioner yet. I'm not dead yet. I'm very active. I'm very, I'm still working. I could still do this. I think that was the primary thought. I could still do this. So, and why not? And how could we make this happen? So that started my head thinking about, if not now, when? There's loads of things that we always say to ourselves. Oh, when I retire, I'll do this, or when the time is right, I will do something. But the time is never right, and it really, there was a few other things happening. My husband and I, a lot of our close family members had, passed away over the last sort of 10 years. There'd been one illness after another. And we were very much conscious of life is short or can be short for some people. Driven a bit by that. And then there was a book I read, and I have totally forgotten the details of it, but it's an Australian palliative care nurse. And the book was called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. It's a really good read. I'll follow up afterwards with the name of the author, but Top 5 Regrets of the Dying should get you there. Yeah, she talks about all this time she spent with basically people on their deathbeds, and their top 5 regrets were things like staying in a bad relationship for too long. Wish I worked too hard. All the things that they regret. And again, that affected me a lot. How we think about things, and what would I regret perhaps. And it's not like I made a list, but it was one of those things was, traveling in a van for a lot of the year, or doing more travel. I love travel. So that's something I wanted to do more of. So yeah, that's probably a very long answer to your question. but yeah, because that's how it really started.
And you, like you said, you did travel before. So what was the difference between this long-term travel? Because I think that's one thing that people might be confused by.
Yeah, again, I mean, the travel before had generally been holidays. And I know in the UK we're blessed with a lot of holidays. I think I'd got to the point of having 5 weeks in the year. But even so, you could take 3 weeks off and travel around Europe. But you end up going to, it's still very fast. It's very fast. You don't really get to know a place. And yeah, again, my thinking is around, well, hang on a minute, why couldn't we base ourselves somewhere for maybe 2 or 3 months and get to know a different locality, a different culture? Um, we both, my husband and I, we both love hiking. We could go on long walks, get to know a different area, avoid the touristy spots. We don't really like the tourist places. And again, you're bringing, you're helping the local economy to a certain extent, and yeah, it's that was the reason really. It was like, can we do more of this, and why couldn't we just make it part of our lifestyle?
Yeah, the way that I always traveled ever since I was a kid with my parents, my mom always had a tendency of like, what would it be like to live here? So instead of like, if we went to a new place, and we were mostly in cities, instead of going to all the must see, the museums and the hot spots, it was sort of like, well, where is the local cafe? What would we really do if we lived here? A local will not, like if you're in New York City, no New Yorker actually has been to the Statue of Liberty. Maybe a little bit. If you grew up there, you might go for a school trip, but they have their routine, and so it was sort of like learn a routine. And then because you might go back if you really liked it, you'll go back, and then you have your routine, and then you can go and then maybe do the touristy thing. So I always had that element too, but it became more and more of like, yeah, stay for at least a month. You get to know these people. And I also noticed, particularly, for instance, Rome, I did not like, but I was there for a month. And Rome is growing its tourism a lot, but they are getting sick and tired of the tourists. But they kind of, oh, she's here for a while. Like she keeps coming back. So then they kind of were nicer to me. Have you noticed that when where the locals are like, oh, you are here for what? You're not here for a short good time. You're actually going to be useful for us. Like you said, helping with the local economy will actually share with other people, like come back to, like if you're going to come and visit this small town, the place to go for a great meal or whatever. Notice that shift between the locals.
Absolutely, absolutely. We often stay in Portugal for about 8 weeks over the winter, and it's yeah, it's interesting. Like and not a lot of the locals will speak English because we're not staying in any touristy area. And whilst there are a lot of expats, they might be Dutch, they might be German as well as English. So they're used to perhaps foreigners coming and eating in their restaurants and things like that, but they're not used to perhaps everybody, on the touristy side, they're not used to tourists. And they generally find that there's a particular waitress I will always remember, and she teaches us bits of Portuguese every time we go in and say no, 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 it's obrigado, or no, it's really fun. So yeah, we get that sort of engagement, and then there's a local cafe, and the lady who runs it, her husband's the local shepherd, and it's like the old-fashioned, shepherding going on with a man walking and on a bicycle, and with his dogs. So it's just a completely different life that you get yourself immersed in, and you get to know people, and you get to know the local gossip, and yeah, it's fascinating, and it's just the same anywhere in the world. But it's just the language barrier is difficult. Being English, we're very privileged in that everybody generally speaks English, or it's the common language that people try and communicate in. So I'll admit I'm pretty lazy on learning different languages, but I have enough to get by in Portuguese, Spanish, French to order food, basically.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
necessities.
yeah,
Um, well, so one of the things that I also wanted to bring with Safe Passages is the tech literacy. So there's media literacy, which is one of my graduate studies, to understand all of the different ways to avoid what has become a common term, which is like fake news and things like that. But there's the growth of technology and how much we depend on it. There's also a lot of mistrust with it or confusion about it with for you. And the more that you travel, like we now, I think it came out earlier in the summer of 2025, where in the EU, they are making everything facial recognition. And soon they don't even need a passport. It's all through your face. There's lots of pros and cons to that. Or, everything is like you can check in online. So all you got to do is get your ticket and go, especially if you're carry on, which I usually travel with carry on. So I can like get to the airport really fast and all that stuff. What has it been like for you when you've been, especially with the more travel and with your business, working with technology? Was it nervous? Was it not? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's I'll be honest, it's pretty standard for me. Throughout my business that I set up 15 years ago is an arts business, and I paint and I sell my work and I work with different companies. So I've regarding that aspect of my work, I've always sort of been online with that. Prior to that, I was working with a software company, but within the arts industry. And then prior to that, I was working, just basic stuff on the phones for a theatre company. And technology has always been part of my work, full stop, ever since I graduated, quite a few years ago. I've grown up with technology, and yeah, it's always been part of my world. But I would say now it's more a case of, in terms of security and in terms of being comfortable with it. I mean, I caught myself the other day. I thought I've got not all my cards, but some of my cards on my phone, and I thought I am this piece, this device in my hand. If I were to lose that, how problematic would that be? And it would be majorly problematic. It would be, especially if we were abroad and I got my phone stolen, which has happened to me. I was in Santiago in Chile quite a few years ago now, but yeah, I was pickpocketed and my phone went, and it was, it makes you think, oh, right, if it happened today, it would be even worse than it was, 4 or 5 years ago. But certainly I think a lot of it also is it's common sense. So when we weren't traveling, there's certain things that we would do, like if we were in an internet cafe or anything like that, I'd never log on to my bank, that sort of thing. And it's carrying those forward through every sort of new iteration of technology change. One of my first jobs was working on the phones, taking people's bookings for theatre tickets, and you become really aware. We're talking in the 1990s, so people would readily give you their credit card details, all the information that you needed. And there was a lot in the 90s, there was a lot of credit card phone fraud, because people would take your details and then they would go and buy some stuff for themselves, and there weren't all the checks that are in place now. It's really, really difficult to do that sort of um, you know scam transaction now, but back then it was really, really easy. But you become aware of it, and then you're like, oh, okay, I really shouldn't be in a public place giving my phone number out over the phone. And you rarely do that now. It's all on an app via your phone, and you're paying, you know,
It
through
has like the
like a
two
secure,
step authenticator and
yeah, two-factor authentication. I mean, that sort of it's back to basics. So I have two-factor authentication on everything. There's no exceptions. If I'm doing any banking, it's always through an app, and it's exactly as I would do it at home, when I'm traveling. So, I mean, I have a it's not a European bank account, it's a UK bank account, but it supports European transactions. So I don't, there's a lot of the extra fees I don't pay. Um, and again, that's all via an app. Um, and yes, it is, I think, sort of common sense, but also, um, yeah, it's exactly the same as I do at home. We do have a base in the UK that we spend a few months of the year at, but then the rest of the time we travel. So we have our own Wi-Fi network that we take with us. We have
Oh,
a
that's cool.
router. We have a 5G router. We don't have Starlink or anything like that. I mean, that would possibly be an option in the future, but for now, we just have a router with a local SIM card in that we either buy when we get there, or we've got two or three that we can interchange with that cover most of Europe. So, and again, that means it's a private network for us to use. Nobody is allowed to access, unless we give them the password, they can't access our internet. Again, it's kind of replicating what we have at home.
That's so cool. I didn't even know that's possible.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. But
um,
yeah, I'll be honest. My husband is we joke he's the CTO of the business. That's all he does. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wanted to know the details of what we got, I could probably dig it out for them. Yeah.
and then do you ever is there any resources that you or maybe your husband like to check about, like for instance when you're crossing borders and you're like, oh, it's going to be this visa but it's by facial recognition or this and that, like to stay up to date, do you use anything like a regular newspaper or well, or blog site or anything like that, Substacker?
Yeah. Actually, no, I don't think there is. Generally, we do check the EU website because for us being so close to the EU, and that's where we do a lot of our travel. That's where the most changes are coming about at the moment. Certainly with the facial recognition. Obviously, post Brexit, there's some limitations on the number of days that you can be in, and with all this automatic recognition, it's you know it's much more difficult to have a bit of any sort of leeway. If you're a few days over, you're going to get fined. So or even worse, not allowed back in. So you really, as a traveller from outside of Europe, you really need to keep on top of the number of days that you're in the different countries you're travelling to, um, and what areas. So I do generally refer to the EU website. There's in the UK, it's just the government website. It's gov.uk, but there's a similar one for Europe. Um, Similarly, there's a few Facebook groups of all places. I mean, you sort of think of Facebook as being dead and gone, but in terms of Facebook groups, I still use those, and there's certainly ones for motorhome owners that are travelling around Europe. When we travel further afield, such as Mongolia or Southern Africa, we've been to Namibia, we're going to South America next year, Ecuador, and when we're not traveling in the van and we're traveling by plane and stuff, then we will just do research from either their government website of the country that we're going to, and we will just go and individually check. There probably is a better way of doing that and better resources available, but again, I tend to like to go direct to source on these things, and then work my way back out of there and say, right, well, where else can I find information from?
That's a good one to always go to their official government website for
Hmm.
travelers. I do remember I recently had to go to London and I forgot that now Americans need to get a visa. Um, and so I was leaving in 12 hours. So it was midnight and I wake up, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I was like, I have the app, I did it, and they're like, it takes up it can take up to 2 to 3 business days. And I'm like, it's a
Mm,
Friday. Great.
mm.
And I was freaking out. But I have the email. It's like 12:28. We have received your application. 12:29. You have been accepted,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yes.
Because
Phew.
I was like, oh, thank God. But it's an interesting, and then of course there's the passport privilege because I have a few friends. Like one is a Bangladeshi, which is one of the worst passports to have, and she is just always like, "You lucky bitch." It's like you woke up at midnight and you were like accepted within a minute. That can't happen for me. Like in months in advance, and usually she gets accepted, but it's much more and they're like, you need to prove to us, X, Y, and Z, your income, and like, why are you coming to England?
Yeah.
And for sure, what's your exit flight, and
Mm.
all sorts of stuff. So it isn't, and then they're going to do that for the EU. They keep delaying it, but it's all. I had to do that for Kenya, and it was so confusing. And I'm like, I don't get this, and all that stuff. But it is annoying. But then I think one of the things with the EU is like instead of the visa, it would be something with facial recognition. I could be wrong, but it's all kind of confusing, which leads me to forgive me, but I'm going to ask you about like, so you were in your 50s when you really decided, okay, I'm able-bodied, like, knock on wood and all that stuff. Like, what's keeping me? Not just because I'm in my 20s, whatever. Um, that to do this more full time for the most part, to travel the world and run my business and all that stuff. Was there any misconceptions that people were like, "Oh wow, do you like you guys have responsibilities at home?" Or the tech thing, because for instance, my mother who's now just turned 70 was still very nervous every time she has to go meet me somewhere. She hates technology. She's like, I will just check in at the gate, or not the gate, but she
Yeah.
can't do it on the phone. And she's like, I hate this. I need a visa. Forget it. I'm not going. That kind of mentality that they're like, it was a lot easier. First, it was after terrorist attacks in September 11th, 2001, when security lines were a lot stricter and longer. You had to come in 2 to 3 hours before your flight.
Mm-hmm.
You had to take out your laptop. In certain countries like the US, you had to take your shoes off, all that kind of stuff. People were like, forget it, I'm not doing this. Then it was more of these kind of, okay, you can do it online, of these check-ins. But then they're like, well, now they want us to like show our passport, like take a photo of your passport. No, it's a glare. You got to do it again. And then they're like, now you got to show your face, and like all this stuff. And they're like, this is, and I get it. It's frustrating. And then there's the two-step authorization to make sure it's
Yeah.
you. And they're like, oh my gosh. And, all sorts of stuff. Was there anything that people were kind of like, oh, bravo for you at this age kind of mentality? And you're like, I'm not an imbecile. So
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, yes and no. I think, obviously the people that know me, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, Joe's gonna go off and do that. I've always like to think I've lived life slightly differently. And not it's more societal pressures, I think. People perhaps some people perhaps think, oh, they're having money troubles, so therefore they're going to pack all their life up in a van and go traveling, um, which isn't the case. Or a lot of people are very much, well, that, yeah, that's all well and good, but we've got responsibilities, and we do as well. We have a new grandchild. We still have elderly relatives that will need care at some point. But it all comes down to not putting things off. And perhaps this last year we've not travelled quite as much as the previous years, but next year is very much a full on year of travel. And again, it's just being able to be fluid and to, I think, embrace change.
Mm.
is it's a mindset. So I had a chat with my mother when she was in her 70s, and I can't remember quite how the conversation came about, but she said to me, she said, Joe, she says, the thing is, I'm in my mid 70s, and she lived to be 94, and but we had this conversation a few times within those like 20 years. Um, she just said, she says, but in my head, I'm in my 30s, and I always have been, and I think I always will be. And I think if you can keep that sort of mindset, I mean, certainly I'm exactly the same. I'm just like my mother. In my head, I'm somewhere in my 30s, and I don't really think that that's ever going to change. And certainly, physically, there may be changes ahead. Who knows? But I don't think that would. I'd hope that wouldn't hold me back. But as well as that, there is that keeping up with the change and keeping up with technology. I think people of my age group, demographic, are in a way are fully aware of what's going on purely because of what we've seen. We had childhoods where there was no social media. Um, there were computer games and arcade games and handhelds that started to come out, which were, everyone was like, "Oh, put those down and read a book for goodness sake." But it's still the same. It's just more extreme now. But we have seen that in my first workplace job had no computer. The second one did, and then by the third one, I was learning a PC from with no training, just learn as you go on the job. And having seen that from mobile phones, through the whole development, over the last, 40 odd years, and the speed at which that has the change has come about, I think we're very aware that if we don't keep up, then we are going to be those people, in our 70s, 80s, 90s that just can't cope with everything. And I think as we age, our brains crave routine. And personally, my husband and I, we're very, there's lifestyle routines, which is one thing, like going for a walk and maybe having a morning coffee. But there's that sort of getting stuck in a routine. We're very conscious of breaking that and not being in a routine at all, and just saying, right, we want to push ourselves out of our comfort zone every so often. And I find there's plenty of times when we've not been traveling for a while, and I'm like, oh, do I really want to go? We're talking about going back to Mongolia next year, and I'm like, oh, do I really want to go? It really is quite a culture shock going there. And then I'm like, and then I remember how I felt afterwards, and it was just amazing. And it's like, oh my goodness, what? And I think, especially as we get a bit older, you have to fight that a lot more than perhaps when we were a bit younger. But yeah, apart from that, the biggest thing I get is, oh, well, that's, I couldn't do that. From other people is like, well, yeah, that's okay, you can do that, but I couldn't do that. And I'm very much like, why not? Do you want to do it? And if you do, you don't have to go extra. You don't have to do the whole thing, and sell up your house and move into a motorhome and go traveling. You can. There's different variations. There's a scale. You can. Yeah, I would always say give it a go. If you quite fancy it, then just rent a van and try it out. Take a couple of weeks somewhere. See what you
You
think.
guys get 5 weeks vacation.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true.
And
Yeah.
even for us, because there's, and I find it is true that they say like Americans, we really don't know vacation. And I don't. I still work. And I was like, well, then just talk to your work and say, can I just take the week, or sorry, the month and work remotely, like from
Mm.
home? And just don't tell them that you're in Mongolia. Who cares? Unless you work for like the government, and like that's like a breach and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But they're like, no, I can't do that. And I'm like, why not? Because you'll get up, you'll have like the morning and afternoon, like early afternoon to go explore, and then you'll work, and you'll be in bed by 11 p.m. still. Like it's a very doable thing. It's harder when you get to Asia, which is why I haven't been able to really explore parts of Asia. The furthest has been like Dubai, but it's like, because that's 12 hours. And I was like, oh, this is difficult.
Yeah.
But I was like, or you save up and you take your actual vacation days and you go to Mongolia. But I always say the scariest place to be is your comfort zone, because you just become too complacent and then you think, I wish I could do this, but it's not possible.
Yeah, you're so right. Yeah.
So it's kind of I'm like, that is just an excuse. um, so I totally agree with you. I wanted to also ask you a little bit about running your business, because you're an artist and you do sell your work online, but do you have like a place, if people buy it online, or do you also sell it in person? Like, how do you navigate? How much do you bring with you? How much do you not? What if somebody robs you? That kind of
Yeah.
mentality too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, gosh, quite a big subject. The business side is I always think of it a bit like a portfolio business. So there's it's artwork, but it's I have three solid revenue streams coming in from my artwork. One is um, uh, painting commissions. I paint a lot of animals to commission, people's pets, their dogs, their cats, and those are I use time blocking basically. So I will block out a certain time in the year when I am painting in watercolor and I'm doing my pet portraits, because I need to. I've found with changes with the EU, um, and shipping, not necessarily to the States from the EU, but I've basically found navigating shipping from the UK to pretty much anywhere in the world is fine. But the sort of downside is I need to physically be there to ship the painting. So I will only do that amount of what that sort of work when I'm in the UK. So that falls down into a period of a few weeks every year. So the rest of the year, I also earn money through licensing. And licensing means that my artwork is picked up by other companies and used on different products. It could be stationery, could be I've got a range on bags, and I work a lot with greeting card companies like Moonpig, and in the UK it's called Thoughtful. So I'll design for them, and that I can do from anywhere in the world. And then they pay me a royalty fee based on what images they use on what products and in what areas of the world. And then lastly, I publish my own greeting cards to stockists in the UK. There's a few in Canada and others worldwide. And again, these are primarily canine focused. They're dog cards, so they're that I work with a printer in the UK, and they because these are bulk orders, so the minimum order is going to be several hundred cards are going to be shipped somewhere, so they will print, pack, and post for me. So I'm basically working with someone else in the UK that does all the heavy lifting for me. In the past, I've worked with a warehouse. I've basically brought in a load of stock and had it put in a warehouse, but yeah, it didn't really work out very well. It was a bit yeah, the trust went and the customer service was terrible. So when it's you and it's your brand and it's primarily just me working on my own, it needs to be something that you can really trust. So that didn't work out too well, but never mind. I now do just a few select items, I think like merchandise with some of my popular designs, and they're sort of on print on demand. So so that's kind of how the business is structured, and I do have to, any freelance illustration work I can do from anywhere, but I have to look at everything and say, right, where am I going to be for that type of work, and can I do it from abroad, or do I have to wait and do it during this point of the year when I'm in the UK? So that's how I get organized basically. In terms of taking stuff with me, I used to take everything, absolutely everything. I had this massive, great big box of all the art supplies I could think that I would need, and it would go in the basically the back of the van and take up all this space. And my husband would be like, "Do you really need this? Do you need this?" And now over the years, we take less and less, and that goes for everything from clothes and toiletries to we go with a small little bag now, and that's it. So yeah, with painting materials, I just take some of my favorite paper, my sketchbooks, my favorite paints, and that's it. Because again, when we're traveling, a lot of the time, it's ideas driven. It's so inspirational for ideas that I really focus the time on doing stuff for my Substack. So, like when we're traveling, I'll do little sketches of where we've been that I can share with my audience there. But I can also get ideas for either a new greeting card range or a set of prints or maybe some paintings. Yeah, so um, I'm not too bothered now. Plus, it's certainly in Europe, there's plenty of art supply shops wherever you go. You can usually track one down if you need anything. Yeah.
Is there particular apps or resources that you really would like to recommend? And do you have a referral, like affiliate link that I can share with the show notes?
Um, Certainly, no. In terms of supplies, I do. In terms of Jackson's Art, I've got an affiliate link with them. I get all my art supplies from them, but certainly not so much for any sort of tech or anything. But I mean, the again, I use what I would use at home. There's nothing really that special. There are, I would say, 2 to 3 apps that I use regularly when we travel. Certainly in Europe, which I wouldn't be without. One is called Search for Sites, and it's basically it's aimed at van owners and people traveling either with a even if you're traveling with a caravan, it's useful. And it's Search for Sites, SITES, and it searches like not only campsites but other places where you may be able to park overnight. So in Europe, you have the concept of airs, which are usually run by the local town, and that you can rock up with your van or your motorhome and spend a few euros for the water, but eventually they're either €10 a night or they're free, and you've got water and facilities to get rid of your wastewater or anything like that. So Search for Sites is great. In the UK, there's one called Park for Night, and that covers a lot of things that like pubs will open up their car park and have spots for 2 or 3 vans. The idea is you can then go and have a drink in the pub or maybe a meal. You'll go and eat in there, and again, it's either free or very low cost, like £10 or something like that. So we use those a lot. We also use Polar Steps, which is a great app for tracking your trip that you can share either with everybody, with the world, or just with family and friends. So we use that a lot. And yeah, I probably wouldn't be without Zoom and things like Dropbox. I mean, actually, going back to your sort of security kind of question, certainly for me, I do take a laptop. I don't use it that often anymore. I used to have sort of like all the Adobe Photoshop and things like that on it. I don't use those anymore. I generally primarily use a tablet to work from, but anything that I have and I work on when we're away is always on uploaded to Dropbox or Google Drive or the iCloud. I've got a different scheme for each of those subscription. I use them for different purposes, and everything that I have technically is in the cloud as well. So I don't travel with a hard drive as such. Um, I think we worked it out. I think that the maximum I might lose is perhaps 24 hours of stuff that might go, depending on the auto upload time that I have for various things. So if anything gets stolen while we're traveling, it's the physical piece of kit that's gone. My work hasn't gone, which is important because I do a lot of work now on Procreate, which is an app on my iPad, and Procreate is amazing. I think that's one of my favorite things to use as an artist.
Good to know. I didn't know about this. Yeah, the only thing about these things like we transfer just, and I have to double check, but they
I
updated
saw
their
that. Yes.
terms and conditions because now
Yeah.
AI can keep it or something. So now
Yeah.
we
Use
have
it for
to double
training.
check for
Yeah.
training.
Anything
And then
used.
so now Dropbox and Google Drive, and we're like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Because
I know.
I
So
rely on those too.
yeah, someone, if they do that, someone will set up one where it doesn't do that. Although,
Yeah.
how can you? I mean, can you really trust big corporations to
That's
say
the
to
other
do what they
thing. So
say?
hopefully my goal is to also this podcast, it forces me to educate myself
Yeah,
on that stuff. And yeah, and it's just like it's not like it's impossible to protect yourself. It's also, people are like, "Oh, it's just not worth trying to fight it." And I'm like, "Well, why wouldn't it be?" Just trying to find the best things that work for us. So, thank you for sharing.
yeah.
Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you'd like to share?
I just thought we were just sort of getting into that range of sort of trust and thing. The other thing that I haven't told you about, which was an interesting story, is that there's in the state, Timu, don't you? You've heard of
Oh, no,
Timu? Timu, Temu. It's an Asian marketplace, a bit like Amazon, with
no, I
everything
don't.
that is certainly in Europe and the UK. It's everything is super cheap on there, and everybody buys on there. But it's a marketplace, so people in Asia are setting up shops where you can buy stuff that is basically, I would say, a lot of the designs are ripped off of brands. And I had my entire greeting card collection scraped off the internet and sold on these sort of. If I mean, Timu as a company have done a lot to manage this, but that there is this whole AI,
That they can take it.
automated scraping of things. They can just take it, use it. Certainly the UK government is doing very little to support artists on this side. So, we're having to sort of battle it ourselves. And and again, sometimes it feels a bit like a force that is too big to fight back to. But I'm now part of a program working with Timu to, help set up an automated program that can verify stuff, because they want to grow in this market, so they don't want the theft of artwork from, you know, legitimate people to damage their business, which it has been a bit, I think, in the UK certainly. People
So
haven't
instead
trusted
of
the platform to buy from it. So instead of just carry on regardless and saying, oh no, it doesn't matter, we'll just let them copy the work and it's all money to us, they have actually been a bit more proactive in the UK and said, no, well, let's work with creatives to what's the best way. I mean, there's a lot easier ways that they could be doing it. They could just put the onus on the on the person setting up the marketplace and setting up their shop on the platform. But yes, there's still some progress. I mean,
I
how
think
it'll all
that's
turn out,
also that
who
you guys are
knows? But
working together. Like you decided with lack for a better term, I was like, you're working with the enemy. Like, keep your
yes,
enemies
yeah,
close because it's sort of, you're like, well, you just stole my stuff and now you want to work with me? No, might as well,
yeah,
because you could either keep working with friction or be like, listen, we know that there's a market. We know we can't rely on necessarily our governments to, even if they wanted to try and protect us, it's going to take a long time for a law to pass. And by that
yeah,
time, you like AI has developed even better, and all that stuff. So
yeah,
let's work together. I think that's great. Can you, will you keep me posted on that?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
there anything like
yeah. I will.
a website or something now that you guys are calling it, or?
No, it's very new. I've only just been contacted literally a couple of days ago. And it's via a greeting card company called Thoughtful, which is where a lot of the theft originated from. Timu are not, Timu as a company, not, as far as I'm aware, they're not the ones who are stealing the artwork. It is the people who are using their platform and setting up their own shops within their marketplace, and they are stealing from other people and putting things on there to sell. So at the moment we have to individually go through and say that's my image and it's come from here on my website
Mm.
or my page on the greeting card website, and you have to prove it each individual case. So at the moment my husband runs a fairly regular check every at least once a week, and then we go through all the it's just like using Google Lens, saying, right, where's my artwork tipping up today? you know it's also there's a different culture in Asia and China about copying. It's not seen as theft at all. It's seen as, if anything, it's a compliment, and it's like,
I was
no,
going to
no,
say
no.
it's like
And
flattery, isn't it?
it's like, no, not on this side of the world. It isn't. I'm afraid it's just theft, because you see the amount of sales that they've had on their platform, and you're just like, wow, well, that's looking at several £1,000s for me. That's just I'm not going to see anything of. So yeah, it's a very serious thing. And then how, yeah, there's another completely different, a very interesting conversation is like, how as an artist, what if someone is able to then go into AI and say, here's a photo of my dog and I want you to paint it in the style of Joe Scott. I mean, at the moment I've noticed AI can't quite get my
Mm.
quirkiness. I think it'll be, I think in a way it's going to move towards, um, you know, artists' work made by hand is going to become much more popular in a way, I think, if you can prove that you did it by hand.
Right. But it's great.
But
I find this very promising, actually, that you
yeah.
guys are working with this platform that others have been using and abusing it. And they're like, okay,
Yeah.
they're using us. Why don't we work with you guys to keep them from abusing it and
Yeah.
stopping it? Because we can't rely to others. And yes, I can make a profit,
Mm.
but let's work together. I think that's
Yeah.
great. So please keep me
Yeah.
posted on that.
I
It's
will.
these are the things that I really like to learn about and hear about because yeah, otherwise the rich keep getting richer and then we just
Yeah.
get more like damaged and all that stuff. So and then I was like, but then that's actually on us because we let them.
Yeah.
Like
There's
making
there's
those
a
efforts.
there's a great organization which I'm a member of in the UK. It's called Anti-Copying in Design, and the acronym is ACID. And they do a lot to highlight. They do ever so much to. I can, register, or I have done. I've registered a lot of my original pieces with them in their data bank. They do a lot to raise awareness of theft across the media. And also, they're the ones who are starting instigating conversations with the likes of Timu and stuff like that. So yeah, ACID is a good resource for
Definitely,
what's
I'll share
happening.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Oh.
Maybe we'll have like a sequel and we'll
Yeah, we
have
should definitely.
Timu
I'd love
on
that.
and Acid on and
Yeah,
be like, what else can we do? Because
yeah.
that's what my hope is like Safe Passages will be a resource so that people can be like, I'm a little nervous about facial recognition, or I'm an artist, or I'm a writer,
Hmm.
or something, and what is out there. This would be a resource for people. So thank you so much. I
Yeah,
will definitely
you know,
put all of this in the show notes. And yes, thank you.
brilliant.
Everyone check out The Traveling Artist on Substack. And yeah, thank
Thank you. No, thanks for having me. It's been wonderful.